Fishing like a local isn't just about catching fish. It's about connecting with the environment and the people who call it home. It's about hearing the stories and traditions that have been passed down for generations and sharing unforgettable moments with the people you meet along the way. Fishing like a local is having an experience that stays with you forever. And with Fishing Booker, you can experience it too, no matter where you are. Discover your next adventure on Fishing Booker.
Charging your boat battery has never been easier. Our 20, 30, and 40 amp Battery Tender Wave Charge Pro multi-bank chargers safely charge and maintain your boat batteries. The 2, 3, and 4 bank chargers are waterproof, vibration resistant, and will never overcharge your battery. Whether you're on the water, on the road, or in the wild, Battery Tender has you covered. With our variety of battery chargers, jump starters, and solar chargers, Battery Tender can charge and maintain any vehicle's battery. Start with trust. Start with Battery Tender.
Hi, I'm Adam Berkmans, and today we're making green chili snow goose burgers. This recipe was created by me. I actually created this recipe for Harvesting Nature's 2024 Snow Goose Culinary Camp, which took place in Mound City, Missouri. My role there was camp cook, cooking instructor, and butchery instructor, but camp director Justin Townsend and I did get a chance to do a little hunting too. I've got to say, we ran into quite a few birds. We were lucky enough to harvest several geese, which allowed for some experimentation in the kitchen. One of the dishes we made for guests and staff were these green chili snow goose burgers made from ground snow goose, breasts and legs, and pork and bacon. While cooking them on the flat top griddle outside, the snow geese continually streamed overhead, a cacophony of honks drifting down at all points in time. In fact, anywhere you were in Mound City, you could look up and see endless giant V's of snow geese streaming overhead, accompanied by constant honking. Millions of snow geese. What a place. These burgers made for a filling and tasty lunch, and were just the thing everyone needed before heading back out to the pit blinds located in a nearby cornfield. Now, any green chili burger is great, but made with wild snow goose, it's like the perfect grass-fed beef burger with even more flavor. A lot of people online have assured me that snow goose isn't really worth eating and that the birds are nothing more than sky carp. Sky carp? More like hamburger of the sky. So why were we seeing so many snow geese in one spot, and why were we allowed to harvest so many of them? Well, there's an interesting story behind how a native goose landed itself in big trouble in North America. Snow geese are a species of goose endemic to North America, which can be split into two subspecies, the greater and lesser snow goose. Although they got their name from their white plumage, the lesser snow goose, particularly smaller than its greater cousins, can be found in two color phases, white and blue. White morph birds tend to be all white except for their black wingtips, while blue morph birds have blue or gray feathers on their bodies with white feathers on their head, neck, and tail. These morphs are often called blue geese. Immature birds will often also show grayish plumage without much white on their head or bellies. All adult snow geese share reddish feet and orangey pink bills with black tomia or cutting edges which almost resemble lips or like a black grin. Along with Ross's geese, snow geese are collectively called light geese as opposed to dark geese, which include Canada's specklebellies and brants. Greater snows summer in northeastern Canada in their Arctic nesting grounds and generally stick to a tight eastern flyway along the Atlantic coastal plains, often going as far south as South Carolina. Greater snow geese weigh around 7 to 10 pounds and are less numerous than their lesser cousins. Lesser snows summer in the Arctic from central Canada to Alaska and use several flyways, including the Central, Mississippi, and Pacific flyways, to get to the traditional winter grounds on the Gulf Coastal Plain, as well as spots in the Southwest and on the Pacific Coast. Lessers weigh about 4 to 6 pounds on average. Snow geese have a high-pitched call reminiscent almost of barking and can create quite the cacophony when in large groups. They can be quite long-lived, with the oldest example living more than 27 years. It was banded in 1974 and shot by a hunter in 1999. Females generally choose nesting sites on barren land in the Arctic, where they lay 3 to 5 eggs, which take 3 weeks to hatch. Once hatched, the young begin walking almost immediately, and the mother and brood can walk miles in search of food. Snow geese have always been hunted and trapped for food, but by the early 1900s, uncontrolled market hunting, which people did to sell meat, had depleted the snow goose population so drastically that action had to be taken to save them. In 1916, the snow goose was fully protected in an effort to conserve the population. Those efforts worked, and they worked well. Maybe even too well, actually. Despite regulated hunting of snow geese being permitted for the last 50 years or so, numbers have continued to climb well past their pre-colonial population status and into problematic overpopulation territory. There are so many snow geese now that their Arctic nesting grounds are being eaten clean, causing the geese to spread beyond their traditional grounds, causing a potential ecological disaster. What is the reason for this crazy spike in numbers? For the greater snow goose, it was likely conservation efforts. From the 1930s to the 60s, a dozen national wildlife refuges were created on the Atlantic Flyway, providing safe havens and increasing the population from around 3,000 individuals at the turn of the century to over 1 million by the 1990s. The real culprit, though, especially for lesser snow geese, seems to be agriculture. Snow geese could traditionally be found wintering in flooded coastal plain areas, using their specialized beaks to pry vegetation from the ground and forage for seeds. Most lessers ended up on the Gulf Coast of Texas, where they could find their traditional food sources and safe roosting in the natural salt marshes there. In the 1970s and 80s, rice production boomed along these areas, with farmers draining marshes and flooding coastal fields as part of the rice farming process. This provided snow geese with a safe place to roost and very ample grain foraging opportunities. Numbers began to grow rapidly to the point that farmers would often lease their flooded fields to goose hunters for extra cash. By the time the 2000s rolled around, rice production in Texas had slowed to a crawl, and the much larger flocks of geese weren't finding the food they were used to. This caused them to start looking elsewhere. By 2020, snow goose numbers in Texas had decreased from over 1 million birds to just about 300,000. Where did they all go? Most of the birds left for greener pastures, which could be found in states like Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, where they began feasting on corn, soybeans, wheat, and oats on top of the usual rice. Their populations also spread east and west, with snows being found in very large numbers in places like Illinois, Kansas, and Missouri. Huge flocks descend on farm fields, which provide the geese with an easy source of high caloric food, which helps bolster their numbers. Add on to that long lifespans, increased birth rates, and minimal predation, and you can see how populations have soared. With massive monocrop farm operations in many of these states, the geese basically have an endless food supply and an endless area to expand in terms of feeding. Unfortunately, their nesting sites can't handle this exponential increase in growth, and habitat loss and destruction is the outcome. Snow goose populations have boomed on the Pacific Flyway as well. Where the West Coast used to host only a small population of snow geese, they can now be found in huge numbers, nesting in Alaska and wintering in Washington, Oregon, California, and Mexico. Snow goose overpopulation and the resulting habitat destruction is not a new issue. Scientists and conservationists in the 1990s were already alarmed to find that the overpopulation of snow geese was causing irreparable harm to Arctic and subarctic nesting grounds, negatively affecting not only the land but also other species of waterfowl and wildlife that share their living space. By the late 1990s, efforts were underway to reduce snow goose populations to a more sustainable carrying capacity. The Light Goose Conservation Order was mandated in 1999, relaxing hunting restrictions on light geese. These included the use of electronic collars, unplugged shotguns, extended shooting hours, and no bag limits, meaning that hunters could shoot and bring home an unprecedented amount of geese. The goal of the Light Goose Conservation Order was to bring snow goose populations down by half. Researchers had gotten something wrong though. Instead of the population of 3 million mid-continent lesser snow geese that had been estimated, new intel shows that there were likely 8 million, or even as much as 20 million in existence at the time. Despite record numbers of hunters showing up, more than 75,000, who shot nearly 650,000 geese, the population was just too high to curtail, especially since it was double or triple what researchers originally thought. The number of snow goose hunters has dwindled since those first boom years, but they do seem to be more efficient at shooting birds. In the 2019-2020 season, about 500,000 light geese were harvested by about 42,000 hunters. These numbers are simply not enough to effectively reduce snow goose populations to a sustainable level, leaving researchers, conservationists, hunters, and governments to look for different ways to control populations. Still, many believe that without that consistent hunting pressure over the last 25 years, we'd be in an even worse spot in terms of overpopulation. With no bag limits put in place, why aren't more hunters taking advantage of light goose seasons? Well, there are a few reasons. Number one, hunter numbers are simply diminishing. Not as many people are hunting anymore, meaning there are fewer hunters to go goose hunting. Number two, snow goose hunting is hard. Snow geese are much more difficult to lure into a decoy spread than Canada geese or ducks. You often need a massive and very costly decoy spread to bring them in, which is prohibitively expensive for most hunters. Over the years, snow geese have wised up and aren't as easily tricked by white plastic bags on sticks. Better and more expensive decoys are needed. Due to this, many hunters will use the services of an outfitter rather than foot the bill themselves. Since outfitters can also be expensive, this has likely become a barrier to entry for many hunters. Number 3. Traditional light goose hunting grounds have moved. As I mentioned earlier, snow geese used to prefer to spend their winters in Texas, where a sizable goose hunting culture had sprung up. Goose hunters and outfitters would have slowly watched their quarry fly off to different states where the same hunting cultures needed time to become established. Number 4. Many hunters and hunting families will assure you that goose meat is next to inedible. This is likely due to improper cooking methods and a general lack of knowledge of how to handle, process, store, butcher, and cook geese. Let me assure you that goose meat is excellent fare and something I cook regularly. I've never had anyone turn their noses up at it, and I count it as one of my favorite wild meats. It just needs to be done right. Number 5. Hunters can become overwhelmed with birds in hand. With no bag limits, groups of hunters can easily harvest dozens or even hundreds of birds per day. That amounts to a ton of work processing the birds, and that results in tons of meat to bring home. Meat that many hunters don't even like. Some have suggested that extra birds should be donated to food banks across the US, though the question arises, who's going to clean and process them? Also, who's going to make sure that the meat is safe to eat? Some others suggest opening up a market hunt or something like it and selling the birds to the public. There is some validity to this idea, as invasive wild pigs can be sold in restaurants in Texas as long as they are inspected and several rules surrounding the process are strictly adhered to. People have also talked about doing something similar with white-tailed deer in states like New Jersey, where they are very overpopulated. Not everyone is supportive of these ideas, though. Wasn't it market hunting that got us into this mess in the first place? Would there even be a decent market for goose meat? Americans aren't known for their love of goose like some other countries in the world. Personally, I think I kind of like the idea of a very strictly controlled market hunt that can be stopped at any time, though this would likely come with many issues, of course. Although goose meat isn't a popular choice, I think it could become one with proper marketing. A healthy, lean, and delicious meat that when eaten helps with conservation efforts? Sign me up. Well, we'll just have to see what's going to happen. One thing I do know, though, is that something probably has to happen soon. Even though hunters have been doing their best to reduce population numbers since 1999, many researchers agree that the numbers are either the same or that they've gone up since the light goose conservation order was put in place. Luckily, the greater snow goose population on the Atlantic Flyway has stabilized to something more sustainable, but that was due to the much smaller starting numbers for the most part. Over the past 25 years, the ecological footprint of lesser snow geese in the Arctic hasn't been quite as devastating as originally forecasted. These geese are very adaptable and have seemed to spread out from their traditional nesting grounds, slowing down ecological degradation, but also widening the swath of destruction. Even so, many islands in the Arctic have been completely stripped of vegetation and polluted by goose feces. There are problems in the south too. Many are beginning to worry that excessive numbers of snow geese feeding on rice and grains are outcompeting other waterfowl like duck. Snow geese are arriving to these spots earlier and earlier and emptying fields before any ducks can even arrive. No one knows yet if there's a discernible impact on ducks, but many hunters and conservationists are worried. Another worry is climate change. With global warming patterns affecting the Arctic more so than elsewhere, scientists believe that imbalances could cause a massive crash in snow goose populations. A crash like this could wipe out the species altogether. Options other than hunting have been explored, including culling and using poison to reduce numbers, but these options are very expensive and are wrapped in red tape and could have unforeseen consequences on the health of humans and wildlife. Although using hunting as a population control method has only been marginally successful, it has certainly been better than nothing. Increasing hunting pressure in the US and Canada should definitely be part of a multi-pronged approach in this conservation story. Luckily, goose meat is great. If you're interested in hunting snow geese, you should definitely come out to one of Harvesting Nature's wild food skills camps. We hold a Snow Goose Camp in Missouri in February, where we teach guests how to hunt, clean, butcher, store, and cook snow geese. They get lots of hands-on experience, and we'll be able to bring home a cooler full of goose meat, not to mention cooking a snow goose dinner for everyone with me. Visit harvestingnature.com for more information on our snow goose camps or our other wild food camps like the Wild Pig Hunt in Texas. Now, what should you do if you have a freezer full of goose meat? One often overlooked way to prepare goose meat is by grinding it, like I did for these burgers. Because the meat is so lean, I recommend adding something fatty like pork shoulder or bacon to make the burgers more juicy and delicious. This recipe makes about 12 burgers and takes about 2 hours to make with the salsa. You also need a grill or flat top cooker and a blender to make it. For the ingredients. For the burgers, 1.5 pounds of ground goose, breast or legs, meat thoroughly picked for steel shot. 1.5 pounds of ground pork belly, shoulder, or bacon, or you could use a mix of all. 1 large can of Hatch or green chilies. Kosher salt. Harvesting Nature Waterfowl Spice Blend. 12 American white cheese slices. 12 brioche burger buns. Butter. For the salsa, 12 tomatillos, 1 large can of Hatch or green chilies, half a cup of chopped cilantro, half a cup of chopped onion, 2 limes, kosher salt, and honey, sugar, or agave nectar to taste. Preparation. For the salsa, preheat oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Dehusk the tomatillos and put them on a baking tray and into the oven for 20 minutes, or until they begin to char and deflate. Add them to a blender or food processor. Drain the can of chilies and add them to the blender as well, along with the cilantro, onion, and the juice of 2 limes. Blend in pulses until chunky. Season with salt and a sweetener until the flavor is balanced. For the burgers, add the ground goose and pork to a large bowl. Drain the green chilies and squeeze dry. Chop finely and gently mix into the goose and pork mixture. Form the meat into tennis ball sized meatballs and transfer to a tray. Preheat a grill or flat top. Oil if necessary. Add a meatball, then use a sturdy spatula to smash it down into a burger. Repeat with the rest of the meatballs. If using a grill with a grate, do this beforehand. Season the burgers liberally with salt and the waterfowl seasoning. Once a brown crust is formed on the bottom of the burgers, flip. Add the cheese slices and continue cooking to medium doneness, which is about 145 degrees Fahrenheit. Transfer to a tray. Butter the buns and toast on the grill or flat top. Top the bun with a burger patty and a generous spoonful of the salsa. Serve immediately. Enjoy. For more great wild fish and game recipes, be sure to subscribe and follow Harvesting Nature's Wild Fish and Game podcast.
In Wild Country, rules were not created by man. Don't miss Wild Country, Wednesdays from 7 to 11 p.m. Eastern. Presented by Primos. Speak the language. Waypoint TV, the destination for outdoor entertainment. One of the most legendary shows in the outdoors is on Waypoint TV. Don't miss Primo's Truth About Hunting, Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern on Waypoint TV, the destination for outdoor entertainment.